Hello, so in this video we are moving into quadratic inequalities. So when you have inequalities, you'll have that either greater than sign, less than sign, or it could say greater than equal to or less than equal to, but you will not have an equal sign. So when you have an inequality, you do have to shift your thinking just a bit. One of the best ways to solve a quadratic inequality is to use the graph of the quadratic function. So they are showing you this process here. You first need to get a 0 in your inequality. So you can see they move that 3 over to the left side. And then you want to factor if it factors, and most of the ones we will give you will factor. And this will allow you to find your x-intercepts. So you can see they've done that there. And you have an x-intercept at 3 and an x-intercept at -1. Back to this step here, if for some reason it doesn't factor, remember that you can use the quadratic formula that will also find your x-intercepts. Okay, so if you have a trinomial or a quadratic function that will not factor, then just go to your quadratic formula, but you can still find the x-intercepts one way or the other. And then they've plotted the x-intercepts down here, and they found the vertex, and we know how to do that. We've already done that many times, and that ends up being this point here. This let's see, what is that? 1, -4. And they have a sketch of the graph. Now, when you have an inequality, you have to pay attention to the actual sign of what it's telling you. So in this particular inequality, we are dealing with greater than 0, greater than 0. So that's going to be the part of the graph that is above the x-axis, above the x-axis. Greater than 0. So we did this way back in a previous lesson where we looked at where graphs were greater than 0 or maybe less than 0, different things. And so this should seem familiar to you because we have done this before, and where I have highlighted, those are the two spots that are greater than 0. So what you're seeing here are two sections of the graph that we need to represent in interval notation. So on this left side here, remember you use the x values to represent that section of the graph. So that's -infinity to -1 parenthesis union, and then we do this right side, so that'll be 3 to infinity. And notice we are using parentheses here because it is just a greater than, and we are not including this spot right here on the axis because that would be equal to 0. Okay, we're just greater than 0, so we have to use our parentheses on the -1 and the 3. On the next page they actually have that interval there for you. And another way to think about it is doing test values. And some students really like this. So let's say for some reason you can't figure out the graph, or you just don't want to mess with doing the graph right then. What you can do is you can find your x-intercepts. Okay, so you want to find your x-intercepts and you want to mark those on a number line. So in this particular case, our x-intercepts were, let's go back up and look, -1 and 3. So I want to mark those. Whoops, let me do that. Let's see, -1 and 3. And then think about your inequality sign, and in this case it'll be open circle, open circle. All right, and then we want to do test points. So you pick a number from each interval. So this is one of your sections, and you pick a number in that section. So they picked -2. All right, and they plugged that in to see if it checks, and it does check. 5 is greater than 0, so that means this interval checked. All right, let me change to a different color here. So then you pick the next interval, which will be this middle section, and 0 is in that section. So they have plugged in 0 to see if that checks. Well, -3 is not greater than 0. So that one is not checking. That section is not checking. We'll change to a third color here. Oh, that'll be bright. Let's go bright purple here. There we go. And you want to pick a number in that section. So they have picked 4. Right. And they've plugged that in to see what happens. 31 is greater than 0, so it checks, and that checks. So then you write the sections that check as your interval answer. So this section here, that's your -infinity to -1. And then union, this section here checked. So that's 3 to infinity. So obviously we're getting the same answer as what we got when we looked at the graph, but this is a valid way to do it. Okay. So personally, I prefer the graph. I really like using the graph to do it. I think that's quicker and easier for me. But there are a lot of students that really like doing this test point method. So if this is something that's calling out to you, then go for it and use it. When you get on the next page where it's saying the graphic approach, if you prefer to do the test points, that's fine. Just make sure you show your work. Obviously, if you're using the graphing method, make sure you're showing the graph so I can see which way your mathematical thinking was going and how you decided to approach that problem. Now, if we go to the next page here, it talks about what we call the sign chart method. And this is optional, okay? I am not going to require you to learn this at this time. Some students don't really have a lot of great luck with the sign chart method at this stage of the game. Now later in the semester we do some stuff where the sign chart method I think makes more sense of why you would use it and why it's a good thing. So we'll get into it later in the semester when I think it has a lot of there's a lot of reasons to use it. Right now, to be quite honest with you, I think the graph and then the test point method is going to be your best bet. But please feel free to read through this and think about what they're telling you here. And if you like it, then that's absolutely fine. I wanted to tell you though here, if when you get to this, you do not have to do this. You can still continue with the graph or the test values that we talked about. Okay, but you still should do this page, and you should show your work so I can see what you're thinking. All right, and I hope you are having fun with your math and enjoying learning these new things. I'll see you in the next video.